Hi, Heart Room friends. Happy Tuesday. It was so nice to see you guys yesterday on our Google Hangout. We're reading the BFG today, and we're on page 136, and they just got to England. During the next half hour, things moved so swiftly and so silently that Sophie, crouching in the giant's ear, was unable to understand exactly what was going on. They were in streets. There were houses everywhere. Sometimes there were shops. There were bright lamps in the streets. There were quite a few people about, and there were cars with lights on. But nobody ever noticed the BFG. It was impossible to understand quite how he did it. There was a kind of magic in his movements. He seemed to melt into the shadows. He would glide. That was the only word to describe his way of moving. He would glide noiselessly from one dark place to another, always moving, always gliding forward through the streets of London, his black cloak blending with the shadows of the night. It is quite possible that one or two late night wanderers might have thought they saw a tall black shadow skimming swiftly down a murky side street, but even if they had, they would never have believed their eyes. They would have dismissed it as an illusion and blamed themselves for seeing things that weren't there. Sophie and the BFG came at last to a large place full of trees. There was a road running through it and a lake. There were no people in this place, and the BFG stopped for the first time since they had set out from his cave many hours before. "What's the matter?" Sophie whispered in her under-the-breath voice. "I is in a bit of a puddle," he said. "You're doing marvelously," Sophie whispered. "No, I isn't," he said. "I is now completely boggled. I is lost." "But why?" "Because we is meant to be in the middle of London, and suddenly we is in green pastures." "Don't be silly," Sophie whispered. "This is the middle of London. It's called Hyde Park. I know exactly where we are." "You is joking." "I'm not. I swear I'm not. We're almost there." "You mean we is nearly at the Queen's Palace?" cried the BFG. "It's just across the road," Sophie whispered. "This is where I take over." "Which way?" the BFG asked. "Straight ahead." The BFG trotted forward through the deserted park. "Now stop," the BFG stopped. "You see that huge roundabout ahead of us just outside the park?" Sophie whispered. "I see it. That is Hyde Park Corner." Even now, when it was still an hour before dawn, there was quite a lot of traffic moving around Hyde Park Corner. Can you see the BFG in his long black cloak and Sophie in his ear? Then Sophie whispered, "In the middle of the roundabout there is an enormous stone arch with a statue of a horse and a rider on top of it. Can you see that?" The BFG peered through the trees. "I is seeing it," he said. "Do you think that if you took a very fast run at it, you could jump clear over Hyde Park Corner, over the arch, and over the horse and rider, and land on the pavement on the other side?" "Easy," the BFG said. "You're sure? You're absolutely sure?" "I promise," the BFG said. "Whatever you do, you mustn't land in the middle of Hyde Park Corner." "Oh, don't get so flussed," the BFG said. "To me that is a snitchy little jump. There's not a thing-a-ling to do to it." "Then go," Sophie whispered. The BFG broke into a full gallop. He went scorching. Look at him. Do you see him jumping? Scorching across the park, and just before he reached the railings that divided it from the street, he took off. It was a gigantic leap. He flew high over Hyde Park Corner and landed as softly as a cat on the pavement on the other side. "Well done," Sophie whispered. "Now quick, over that wall." Directly in front of them, bordering the pavement, there was a brick wall with some fearsome-looking spikes all along the top of it. A swift crouch, a little leap, and the BFG was over it. "We're there," Sophie whispered excitedly. "We're in the Queen's back garden." So tomorrow we're going to read to find out what happens when they're in the Queen's back garden. And our chapter tomorrow is called The Palace, and we'll be having a mystery reader join us. I'll see you tomorrow, friends.